Hi, Spicewood kindergartners. It's Miss Rayborn again here, and I want to talk to you about what we're going to try out this week. So before I get started, on the last page it asked you to gather your supplies together. And I got my box of crayons, I got myself a bowl of water, I got my paint palette. Mine looks a little bit different than yours, and that's okay. These are just the kinds of paints that I have at my house since I'm at home right now. I don't have the ones that you have. And if you have different paints at home that you prefer to use other than ones in your art kit, you can use that too. Up to you. But I've got some paints, I've got a paintbrush, I've got my watercolors, I've got my crayons, and I've got my big piece of paper. Now my big piece of paper won't totally fit on the page, and that's okay. I'll do my best to show you. I'll just have to scooch it as I go. Now your paper could go side to side, wide, or it could go skinny, tall and skinny. Miss Rayborn is going to decide on tall and skinny. And we're just going to practice some different kinds of lines. So I'm going to lay out my crayons, and I am going to choose one of Miss Rayborn's favorite colors is this sort of reddy orange color. And I want my lines to be really thick, so I'm actually going to use the back side of the crayon when I draw my lines. So I'm going to start in the book that we just read, or not really read because it didn't have any words. The line told the story. There were lots of curly, loopy lines, so I'm going to start with that. And like I said, I'm using the other side of my crayon, not the pointy side, because I want my line to be really thick and fat. So I'm going to make myself a loopy line that goes all the way across. And some of them were kind of the same size, some were a little bit different. But notice how it made a nice fat line. That was kind of nice. I like that. I'm going to try out a new color. So this time, I think maybe I'm going to go with some blue. And I'm going to think about a zigzag line. So a zigzag line has pointed parts, and they can be all the same or they can be different. So I'm going to make some the same. Look how I'm making a pattern. Big one, three little ones. A big one, three little ones. So it's time for a big one. And then it's going to go off the edge before it gets to the other one. Maybe I'll make this look like it's going off the edge on the other side too. I'm going to move my paper up just a little bit. I'm going to switch to a new color of crayon, maybe red. Maybe this time I'll try using the pointed side and see what a smaller kind of a line looks like. One of my favorite kinds of lines is almost like the top of a castle. So it goes across, up, and down. Across, up, across, down. Across, up, across, down. Across, up, across, down, and across right off the edge of the page. So I've got three so far. I'm going to go this direction. I could turn my paper. Sometimes it's just easier if you turn the paper. Let's see if I can fit maybe two more in here. So I'm going to pick a new color of crayon. Maybe this really beautiful green. And I think this time I'm going to think about a bumpy line, and I think I want it to be thick. I'm loving these thick lines. So I'm going to use the back side of the crayon, not the pointy side. And I'm going to make my bumps. Kind of reminds me of a little bunny hopping along. Now if I wanted this to be really thick, I could use my crayon and I could go back over the top of it. Like this. We talked about thick lines and thick lines, thin and thick last week. This one is definitely very thick, and this one is thin. So I have space for one more. So far I've got orangey red, I've got yellow, I've got red, I've got green. You know what? I'm going to try something that might be a little bit tricky, but we're going to love it when you see it. I'm actually, excuse Mrs. Rayborn, going to use a yellow, which might be really hard to see on the paper right now, but when we paint, you'll be able to see it. It'll be really cool. Hold on, we'll wait and see. I think this time, let's see, what kind of line might I make? I might use a castle kind of a line, but with a different kind of a shape. So maybe it'll go across and a triangle point. And I want it to be nice and dark so I can see it. even though it's yellow, which is kind of a light color. So I'm tracing over the top of it again. I'm using the back side of my crayon, and my crayon, as you can see, this one broke, but that's okay. It still works, right? Okay. Now I've got 5 kinds of lines on my paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I use 5 different colors, and I'm going to start to paint. The first thing I have to do when I start to paint is that I have to get my paintbrush wet. So I have to get my paintbrush wet. And then my paints, just like your paints, are watercolor kinds of paints, which means I just tickle the top right on top. Now I'm going to paint this line right here, which is a reddy orange color. So I want to pick something very different than that. I wouldn't want to pick red or orange because I want it to really show up. So I think I'm going to try this purple color. And I'm just tickling the top of my paint. I'm going to turn it on its side and show you. I'm not squishing my paintbrush into it. That will hurt your paintbrush. I'm just being gentle, tickling the top of my paint. Now I can see I've got quite a bit of purple paint on there. I'm going to try just tracing over the top of my line. Now when I start to notice, oh, I'm kind of starting to run out of purple paint on my paintbrush, I need to get my paintbrush wet, get a little bit more on there. Oop, I can spread that down like this. And I'm going to trace, ooh, that was a fun thing to do. I'm going to trace my line with my paintbrush. Now I'm using a different color. And when it dries, you will see that you will be able to see the orange line and the purple around it, which is really fun. So I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to try a new one. But before I can get a new color, I really have to rinse out my paintbrush to make sure it's nice and clean. No, nothing on it before I go to my next color. So blue is a dark color, so I think I'm going to pick a light color this time. I think I'm going to try some yellow. And again, I'm just tickling the top of my paintbrush, tickle, 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 onto my paints so that I don't accidentally make a dent in my paint. This little guy is broken, but he still works. And I've got quite a bit of yellow on my brush, so I'm ready. Here I go, over the top of my line. Now I'm starting to run out of yellow paint. So I'm going to get some more on my paintbrush, and I'm just going to trace the line. So one of the things that I'm noticing with this kind of a line is that it kind of helps to pick up my paintbrush each time I move in a new direction. It can be a little bit hard, get a little extra paint on my brush, to turn my paintbrush every single time. So sometimes I just pick it up and move it in the new direction. A little more water. I've almost made it there off the page. Okay, so now I've got to rinse out my paintbrush, and I'm going to keep going with my lines. So this one is a reddish color, so I would want to pick something different. I think I'm going to pick, I have kind of a turquoisey blue on my paints. I think you do too on the kind that you have at your house. Remember to tickle the top of your paints and go right across the top. Now if you notice you don't have enough paint on your brush, you can always go back and add more. Now I'm going to keep tracing over the lines that I drew on my paper with my paints. Okay, and Miss Rayborn is not going to have you watch me paint my entire paper because I want you to get started on your making. But after you trace your 5 lines or 6 or 7, however many you could fit on your paper, you can also go back if you want to, and you can paint in the places in between. For example, I could paint over here. What if I decided to paint this section? I have to be kind of careful not to touch it. What if I decided to make that blue in between? Get some more of that dark blue over here. So I'm going to go down with it and fill in that space with blue around my line. You don't have to do this, but I love seeing these all filled up with color. So after you have traced over your lines. First you drew your lines with crayon. Then you traced your lines with paint. If you want to, you can go back. Maybe I'll make these little spots inside of here. Look, I have these little loops. I'm going to make them a totally different color. I'm going to make them red inside of here. Okay, so you can go back and paint in between if you want to. Okay, so I hope you enjoy drawing and painting your lines. And next week, Miss Rayborn is working with the kindergarten teachers so that you can turn in your artwork in Seesaw, which I'm very excited to see. And I can't wait to hear about your lines. So enjoy drawing and painting, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.